Awesome. Can you all see that? Excellent. All right. So again, we are ISeeChange. Our mission is to connect people to their changing environments to make solutions together. We are a mission-oriented and value-oriented company. And this is specifically what we do. We are crowdsourcing what we call quantitative and qualitative data, but really we're talking about stories. We're talking about stories about how climate impacts our daily life. We are adding measurements to that, and we are using that information for public planning, adaptation, design, emergency management, anything that is needing the public and its insights to understand. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on why we do what we do. A few examples of how we've used ISeeChange in climate change adaptation and infrastructure design, and then really focus in on our work in Miami. And we love questions, so I'm going to try and get through this pretty quick so that we can have the discussion, which I think is going to be really exciting and informative. So when it comes to designing infrastructure, engineers, city folks, they're often looking at climate change like this. It's a model. It is a theoretical model of how we are seeing flooding currently and how we anticipate it will behave. But we're missing looking at climate change like this, with real people at the center of the process and the insights that they have. I spent well over a decade as a climate science reporter, working in public radio. Again, Kate knows me from that space. And I worked all around the world, and I saw the same thing over and over again, which was that technical solutions failed to meet local needs because it was a top-down process with very little opportunity for substantive bottom-up information to make its way into the implementation in a structured way. And when you look at it, it looks something like this. Are my slides advancing? Okay, good. Just checking. Okay, good, because it doesn't tell me. All right. Cities are struggling to engage residents in making solutions, and it can erode public trust, and it misses valuable insights. And there's no bad actors in that. It's just this question of communication and engagement. And ultimately, this costs firms, taxpayers, and citizens time, money, and frustration. That's because they're not in the room. And being able to functionally create spaces for this to happen beyond even the groups that are 100% dedicated to this full time, to really be able to broaden that conversation, we don't have mechanisms to do that well. So ISeeChange redesigned the traditional engagement process. Our community platform is really designed for municipalities, engineers, and residents to collaborate before, during, and after infrastructure investments. We also define how that happens in terms of the environment. What is a changing environment? In terms of the natural environment, the built environment, and the social environment. We think of our changing environment as much bigger than just the natural environment. And again, I'm preaching to the choir probably in this group, but you'd be surprised, in terms of the conversations we've had with engineers. But ISeeChange is really channeling the knowledge and experience of residents, like this woman, Destiny Bell, to share climate stories via phone or computer. She can also add real-time details that are just really critical to validating and improving infrastructure performance models. And I'll walk through a few examples of what that looks like. But you can see, this is very custom to the problems that we are focused on per location. Our approach, with our approach, we can hear from the residents that we want to hear from the most, but are the least likely to have time to attend public meetings. When we do workshops, we even do webinars. If you have kids, if you have multiple jobs, if you are stressed, then you don't have really time to be civically engaged. And in recent multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects that are funded by the federal agencies in New Orleans, ISeeChange quadrupled the amount of feedback and data that was typically collected. And we used that data for very specific decisions that got and designs. So residents documented disruptive flooding that wasn't originally considered. It wasn't standing out in the models, but residents were able to tell us, actually, this is the spot that causes us the most harm. And in two major infrastructure projects, we changed 4 major design decisions. And we saved more than $500,000 in redesign fees for the firms that we were working with, but we really we're improving the flood resilience of the neighborhood. This is the flood extent of a 2-year storm event, which is really difficult to model. That green park there is where a storm infrastructure project is slated to go in. This area is low income, got probably a lot less than its fair share in terms of HUD money. But because the citizens were able to demonstrate the extent and intensity of these flood events over time using our platform, they have increased the capacity for the storage, the flood mitigation project in this neighborhood. I can go into more details about it, but we're really proud of that. So when you work with engineers, they're like, oh, isn't it nice? You have stories and you have data. They don't necessarily see the value of it necessarily right away. But as we kind of show them the kinds of information that citizens are able to collect at scale that they can't get with just throwing a sensor down, we go from a nice to have to a need to have service. And so we're scaling out this process across the country right now. But it's more than data. When we talk about like, okay, we just need data, well, why aren't we scraping, all the things that we're seeing on Twitter or whatever? There's more than we need than data. It's about public trust. It's about learning, about risk. And it's through dialogue that we are seeing residents who are not familiar with climate change, who are not like the smart people on this call, understand their risk over time and and it is indicative even of behavior change to address those climate risks. So this woman who started using ISeeChange in the very beginning was the classic complainer. Every time it rains, it floods. In this spot, but as she started to pay attention with our tools, she noticed what kinds of rain events causes what kind of flooding, and that can actually lower community insurance rates. That has a real impact on and real value when you educate residents like that. We've even been able to like measure learning on the platform. We've worked with social scientists to do that. But we're really excited about the champions that we see on the platform. So this is a community in Ocean City, New Jersey, who, similar to New Orleans, similar to Miami, they have pump infrastructure because they flood so often. And we are seeing that those users championing the infrastructure projects that they've received and the benefits, and they're trying to encourage other folks up the coast to use ISeeChange to do the same. So what is our project about when it comes to Miami? Well, again, it's a long time coming with some fantastic people who've really seen this process through to get us to now. We are funded by the Knight Foundation for 2 years to work collaboratively with the city and all of you all and kind of the larger residents, the larger community in Miami, to start an ISeeChange community, to use the tool. And, we have been in lots of kind of web conversations with Jane, her team, Alan Dodd, when he was, had not been named the Chief Resilience Officer. And one thing I will say about Alan, just in the very few conversations that we've had, is I'm actually quite impressed. When you talk to engineers, they don't necessarily grasp, right away what citizens can do in this space, but he did. And it was really lovely because there are so many when you really get into the hood of modeling, you see how many mistakes get made just by the virtue of math. I was on a call with, or I was interviewed by this podcast called Climate One, and it was me and the guys from First Street Foundation. So I know, they're the new modeling tool that everyone's been looking to check, flood risk. And when we started getting into it, he was like, yeah, we actually need something like ISeeChange. It's really, really helpful. So, we're really looking forward to the next 2 years. It does, it supports the community manager position. So Claudia has come to us from this and joined our team recently. We really believe in local knowledge and local hires, and that is and that's part of a mission of our team. And working in a co-design with the city about how to make the tool as useful as possible and to avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen in some of these big infrastructure projects. This is Kate's first post on the platform. I drummed it up last night when I was like, oh, it's gonna be great to check in with Kate again. I'm so proud of where you are. I don't mean that in any kind of patronizing way. I'm thrilled that I almost hired you because you're just so talented. But I was looking at, I was just looking at the location, on 2nd Avenue, and we had another post about it, like this stretch of on the platform recently, and it's really about figuring out where problem spots are and understanding them over time. That gives ISeeChange the power, as well as dialogue. It's a very positive place. You see people posting and being like very thankful about other people participating on the platform. And I'll show you kind of a few things that, again, we see in the platform that we're looking forward to seeing in Miami. Once we do know that there are areas that are kind of known flood spots, we want to get the platform established in these areas, but we also have neighborhoods in the city that we have not heard from in 311 or on Twitter or whatever. And those are areas that we'd like to focus on as soon as we get everything kind of established. So when you have a community increasingly invest in local infrastructure projects, increasingly change the flood modeling, it becomes harder and harder to predict how it's going to behave. So we're seeing this in New Orleans, we're seeing this in Ocean City, New Jersey. As you guys add more pump infrastructure or kind of change the infrastructure patterns in Miami, you will have pros and cons of that. You will need people on the ground to help monitor it, but you also need educated, informed folks on how it works. So you don't want this. You don't want people to understand, to interpret the success or failure of infrastructure without context. So this is someone who came onto the platform new and was complaining about a $700 million infrastructure project that was designed for a 10-year storm event. Let me show you what that storm event looks like. On July 10th, last summer, this was one of 5 major flood events that we recorded and documented at scale in the city of New Orleans. We had a 100-year storm event in certain areas of the city. You'll see that parts of the city are also experiencing different flood events. Again, these rainstorms are very granular, so there is not enough data on the ground to actually monitor what kind of rain event you got at scale unless you have citizens involved. We've seen a change of 20 to 50-year storm events in less than half a mile. That actually really matters to how that infrastructure performs. So when you have a 100-year storm event, it is not about infrastructure. It is how do we work together to stay safe and keep, and have better public transit options. Maybe we talk about how different ways that we drive or engage in the cityscape. And so $700 million only buys you a 10-year storm event in this town. And knowing the difference is essential. So we're really proud of the people who are understanding that with us and learning that how nuanced this is. This is that group in Ocean City, New Jersey. They're documenting when it works and when it doesn't, and they're advocating for more with their neighbors. This is what we want to see: people saying, "Hey, it's working. We need more of this." When you have people using the tool over time, you really start to understand patterns. So that woman that you saw in the very beginning, I'd like to come back to that notion. By the way, it is the anniversary of August 5th, 2017, and someone on the platform today posted a remembrance post of this major flood event. I think every community has an event that kind of is a catalyst. This event resulted in mass firings at the Sewage and Water Board because people were so upset, but they didn't really appreciate what a massive flood event it was. But you can see that this woman has been documenting her corner for years and documenting things that happened on her corner. So in August 5th, she got 5.3 inches of rain, and it took 23 hours for her corner to drain. That's crazy, but that's what happened. Subsequently, her catch basin, her storm drain was rebuilt. And fast forward to July 10th, hey, guys. I know, boo-boo. So I believe in bringing your full self to your work. I have 2 children who like to sing in Spanish and run around the house. So hold on one second. Guys, no piano, thank you. They were supposed to be upstairs, but not winning on that one. Anyway, you can see that she got not that different of an event 2 years later in this corner, and it took 8 hours to drain. That's still a major flood event with a major impact, and this is the lowest of the low areas in her neighborhood. So you understand that the very physicality of that space creates the likelihood that her storm drain is going to break. It creates the likelihood that, you know, mail and business is going to be disrupted. This is the perfect place to put an infrastructure project because of this disruption around it. We see people using the tool to advocate for solutions in a very granular way. You know, that's really difficult to scale without tools like ours. So not just a complaint space, but like, hey, how might we use rain gardens here? That is what we are encouraging and we cultivate the community to do. We really love dialogue on the tool. And that's what makes this so different from any of the other tools out there, is that as we dialogue about spaces, we understand that space more. So instead of complaining about the grocery store not doing any heat mitigation, we actually have someone in jumping in saying, actually they tried, but they were really limited in their capacity to do it. So again, complaint spaces are not of service when it comes to the nuances of climate change and infrastructure. We also like to highlight what the city is doing whenever possible. This is our, let me back up. This is from our work in Boston, where we have a very active urban heat investigation that we're scaling out this year. We don't do just flooding, we do any number of climate change impacts, and I'll kind of go through a few of those, but I'm happy to have that conversation as we see fit. We work with sensors, we work with, now we're working with infrared cameras. It's a really dynamic space, and heat is a really tough conversation, but a really important one. To that point, when we talk about reaching people because who are hard to reach, our senior citizens, Kate, we were just talking about this. First of all, I don't know, boomers are really good with their phones and they can't stop. So sometimes I do push back a little bit on technology, but for some of the community members in New Orleans, you know, they are not on their phones. They're elderly and they don't want to engage digitally. And those are some of the most important members of our community that we need to talk to. So what we do is we actually encourage younger folks in the neighborhoods to interview them. And we call that intergenerational transfer of knowledge as well, having young folks talk to older folks. Obviously with COVID, that's challenging, more challenging. Maybe we could figure out a way to do that with phones. Not, you know, smartphones, but just regular old ring the phone kind of things. But we really do love seeing that interaction on the platform, and we have other tools to you know, that we've used in neighborhoods where people don't have internet access as much as we would like to see. So I do include this because, again, when you think about like other, you know, kind of social media platforms out there, when you're scraping data, when you're not engaging in a very specific and focused dialogue, it doesn't go well. We have seen people come to our platform to talk about things that are bothering them, but we don't see this, it is not a dialogue of hate or toxic place to talk. We're really proud of that, and we encourage that, and the dialogue itself is just as important as the data. When we see trends on the platform, we send out alerts. This is a school who was using ISeeChange to document the impacts of red tides. We do work with children and schools. We're actually one of the more popular citizen science tools in the country. We don't really advertise it that way but we do really appreciate bringing kids onto the platform to teach them the act of observation, to understand that they have one of the most important voices in this space. And we do love sending, you know, these alerts to people because it keeps people informed about what's happening, but encourages the dialogue over time in a really iterative and an engaging way. We are, yeah, we're an international community. So if you do hit the global settings on your feed, you see people posting from all around the world. I was looking at the feed last night in preparation for this, and there's a guy in Tokyo who's just on the platform messing around with his own air quality investigation, measuring PM2 and 2.5 and just talking about it. I'm like, this is great. Let's scale this out. Let's play with it. This is wonderful. This is a great time to measure air quality when everyone's not driving as much. So we really are trying to connect that local and global insight. Global solutions don't work at large unless they are really and truly informed and targeted and designed by the people in the places that live there. So, managing that question of scale is kind of one of the things that makes ISeeChange unique. And yeah, I just want to stop talking because we want to dialogue with residents and leaders like you. You understand that a truly smart city is one that is centered, is completely built with the smartest cities sensors. It's people. People are the smartest sensors in the world. And as we kind of see so much focus on data, it's really data and dialogue is data. All right. And there's my son. Sorry about that. All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Kate and Claudia and Melissa.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. That was a really interesting presentation, and it's so exciting to see how ISeeChange is working across so many dimensions and so many different places. I think that the City of Miami partnership is probably one of the bigger ones that you guys have undertaken to date, right? Like, you have communities all over the world, but to actually partner with the city, this is sort of a limited edition or limited number of times that you've done this. So it's exciting to have you here. I was wondering, actually, maybe we could start with you, Melissa, just talking about this from the city's perspective, kind of how the current work with the Office of Resilience and maybe Public Works as well, how you expect ISeeChange will integrate with that, and what are some of the things that we should be on the lookout for, or things that you're hoping to try out now that this partnership is underway?
I think one of the main things that we're excited about is just being able to have a continued dialogue with our residents and the community, because all of our projects that we construct and build that residents will interact with after construction require public input and monitoring. And so having eyes and ears on the ground really gives us the opportunity to monitor how well our projects are doing once they're in the ground. We don't have all the resources in the city to be checking on that constantly, so this is going to be really helpful in that aspect. And then another area that we are excited about that we could use help on via this platform is knowing from residents as Julia said, very granular data. So if something is flooding, it's nice to know it's flooding, but we also need to know what is the extent and depth of the flooding, what's causing it. Is it sunny day, tidal flooding? Is it precipitation? Is it related to a storm? So that's going to be extremely useful for us. And then also, just kind of I think a lot of people here on this platform know that we have the Stormwater Master Plan that should be wrapping up, and we're going to be getting recommendations from that. So models always need to be tweaked, they always need to be calibrated, and having this kind of data will help us to figure out, where we need to tweak the models to make them more accurate, and also be able to compare existing conditions to model conditions.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like it aligns with a lot of what's being done right now by the Office of Resilience. And I was wondering, Claudia, if you could speak a little bit to how you fit into this, because you're the Miami area coordinator, right, for ISeeChange. So what do you anticipate, or what has your role been as far as bringing people on board, and sort of who is your target audience, or the people that you want to be hearing from?
Yes, thank you, Kate. Well, our target audience is really the entire city of Miami. We want to be inclusive, and we want to help enhance the work that the office is already doing. So for that, my job here as a community manager is to really let everybody know that we're launching this initiative here in Miami, that this app exists. And more than focusing on stormwater projects, we want to also talk about your climate story. How are you being impacted in different ways? That it's also social impacts that come with it. And that way, we could also help the office see other things that are happening at the city. And that way we become resilient, right? Together, we're working collaboratively to make our community resilient and better.
Yeah, I like that you brought up, or that so much of this focus is on really the inclusivity, the aspects of, it's all residents. We're trying to have everyone be involved in development of solutions. And Jared, or maybe you, Claudia, too, one of you could speak a little bit to the solutions aspect of things. I think we saw some slides from Julia where, people were talking about, hey, maybe a rain garden would work here. For example, how could that potentially fit into the work that ISeeChange is launching here in Miami?
Sure. I think it works on multiple scales. So really the reason, Julia mentioned it at the beginning, the reason that I came to be working with Julia and ISeeChange to begin with was because I was effectively Melissa's counterpart in New Orleans, and we had gone through a lot of the same kind of work in getting funding for major infrastructure projects. So we were managing hundreds of millions of dollars of drainage infrastructure projects and social resilience programs, and realized pretty quickly that the data that we were using and basing our project designs off of was just woefully inadequate. So these were snapshots in time. So on that grand scale of solution, it really is an opportunity to change the designs and change how they're prioritized and targeted in different ways, knowing that this funding is not infinite and it's not forever. Those kinds of things really need to be targeted in specific ways for the neighborhoods that are needing it the most, that are experiencing it the most, despite what a map might say. But then on the smaller scale, that more granular scale, being able to look at ways that people are already coping is kind of step one. So in neighborhoods all across the world, really, that we're seeing that are already experiencing climate change, increased flooding, aging infrastructure, people are figuring out ways to get around, like Julia said, like how, whether it's home elevations in some scenarios, working with different organizations or trying to seek grants to adapt their homes. Also in New Orleans, part of the resilience projects was assembling residents across a neighborhood to work with the city directly to adapt individual houses. And getting people comfortable with those solutions at that individual scale is critical, in the same way that understanding that a $700 million project might be for a 10-year storm.
Yeah. So we have a few questions in the chat, and I think one of them sort of speaks to what you were just addressing, Jared. People are asking about sort of where can this app be used? Maybe could Julia, Jared, or Melissa, one of you clarify? This is the partnership that we're talking about today is specifically for the city of Miami, but that does not preclude people in Fort Lauderdale or Miami-Dade County from using the app, right?
Exactly. And ISeeChange is free to anyone, anywhere in the world to use. But when we have these specific efforts, we do some targeted effort, targeted work, and, are able to use the data specifically with the city and as our partner. So, anyone in the county can use ISeeChange, anyone in the state can use ISeeChange. And we do see and would welcome other cities who would want to work with us into working with us. But we're really focusing on the city of Miami. The map that we will launch will cover the county. We went ahead and made that decision. We will also, one thing to note about mapping and visualization of data, we are obfuscating the specific location a flood post occurs in to protect people's privacy, but it is visible to the level of the neighborhood, to the census data track. And we do that so that people feel comfortable sharing their data and letting us know, in real time where this flooding is happening. But on the back end, we're able to work with the city specifically on using it for infrastructure design. Another thing to note in this, let's see. And there are some folks in Fort Lauderdale messing around with the app, yes. I think Colin Polsky from we wanted to work with us. So he's a lovely human. We're big fans. Let's see. And Isa, yes, please feel free to use ISeeChange to document any flood that you've experienced. If there are photos in your phone, you can go back in time as far as you want. If you don't have photos, but you remember the day, like this woman who was saying, commemorating the flood of August 5th, 2017, tell us about it. We originally started ISeeChange in Western Colorado, even though I wanted it in New Orleans originally. The funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting sent me to Western Colorado. And all these folks started entering data from the 1933 Dust Bowl. And really that long-term understanding of change is so essential for us to understand. These folks in Ocean City, New Jersey, who use us, there was a point, they've been flooding since the 90s, but they just assume that that is just normal. And that is awesome and dangerous at the same time. We are so adaptive human beings. Our greatest strength is our ability to adapt, but it also, with this timeline, is one of our greatest vulnerabilities. So we need reminders over time. Before the August 5th, 2017 flood, this town wasn't having this conversation. Now we're dealing with 50-year, 100-year, 25 years, 5 years in the course of one summer. So we have to know what has happened in the past to know what we need to do in the future.
And on that point, question here from Mirella and Melissa, I'm going to hand this off to you. So in the past, the city has collected a lot of data on flooding for the Stormwater Master Plan and other projects. Mirella is wondering, how is the city integrating ISeeChange with the flood app or the flood collection that's already been done for the Stormwater Master Plan or other projects?
So it adds a level of granularity that we didn't have before. I think a lot of the data that we collected before was location based, and we're hoping to get some more detail here. And we're hoping that by having this be an online or web based platform, we'll be able to reach more people. So, we were able to do targeted meetings for stormwater within the neighborhoods, and sometimes people weren't able to attend. But this will allow us to reach a larger number of people. So I think it complements the data that we already collected pretty well. And with science, and when you're testing things, the more data you have, the better, right? More points to compare. So it doesn't work against the data we already collected. It's more working in concert with and just adding another layer of specificity and detail and a broader extent.
Yeah, I think just based on my own experience, there is a huge, obviously these models are fantastic, and it's really great to see the amount of modeling that we can be doing with, computer engineers and, climatologists and rain forecast experts. But from last summer when I worked with the city of Miami and we did our public outreach workshops in different neighborhoods across the city, one of the things that really stood out to me is the things that you can't really model. So for example, I think it was Liberty City, we went and we heard from residents who were saying, we get a lot of flooding and it's because our storm drains are filling up with litter. It's not because, there's necessarily like an infrastructure problem. It's just the maintenance. And so that sort of detail is something that you can't quantify if you're an engineer sitting at a desk. Those sorts of things, it's really dependent on residents.
Context is everything. Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I forgot to mention in terms of the value of this for us. We have public works operational crews that go out and maintain our storm drains, but they can't be everywhere all at once. And so knowing this kind of information and having this data can save us time and money as well, in that if the flooding is caused from the blockage of a storm drain, it's the fix is going out and clearing it, right? And if it's a serious infrastructure problem that we need to replace the entire infrastructure, that's a whole different ball game, and that's a whole different set of funds that we're going to need to reach for, right, to fix that issue. So knowing how and when to deploy resources, especially in an era where resources are slim, is very important to us.
And I would also
ahead,
echo
Jared.
something that Melissa said earlier about the monitoring aspect of that, where that fix might come, but the city doesn't often get the feedback that the fix was adequate. You might get another complaint later on, but that kind of feedback loop is something that we really hope to add as well.
And there's also bigger, in the micro details, there are bigger picture things as well. So any place that has a catch basin, storm drain, sorry, that's what we call them in New Orleans, catch basins, that is filled with a lot of trash, there could be a lot of things going on there. One, it's a natural low. So that trash puts on a lot of pressure on that area. And that will just break again over and over and over again. And if you see that kind of pattern happening, then there's a bigger picture ask to be able to address it. It may also be that the local convenience store or fast food chain is right there and there's no trash cans. And we see that all the time, not to mention that some of these commercial properties are not required to do stormwater capture or mitigation on their properties. And those are the ones that flood first. And if you have a persistent puddle, it means that it's collecting water first, or that catch basin is broken. That can be like often the first place what you look during a much bigger event. So there's lots of layers of knowledge that you can derive from this engagement and from this data and dialogue process.
We have another question in the chat asking about if ISeeChange is primarily focused on flooding. You want to speak to that, Julia?
Sure. So one of ISeeChange has evolved in many, in the last few years. We started off as not even, with no quote unquote investigations. We just said, hey, what's changing in your environment? Ask us a question. So you can use ISeeChange as broadly or as narrowly as you want. We do have specific methods for flooding and heat. So we have active investigations, quote unquote, or projects in Boston and Miami primarily this year, as well as the city of New Orleans as our partner here on heat. So we're happy to talk about heat specifically. Heat, flooding also relate to the growing season, also known as insect spread. So we do track insects, we track trees, we track air quality. You can see the investigations on the app or on the website. And know though that on the back end, we treat these as related to each other, and we're actually going to probably be evolving the notion of what is an investigation, because an early growing season puts you at risk for drought and West Nile virus. We know that these things are related, so please use the tool. We learn just as much from the community as we do from creating the space, and so the space evolves as the community uses it. For example, that guy in Tokyo who's messing around with his air quality investigation. Some of the prompts that we use for the flooding investigation came directly from citizens using it. We never appreciated that flood duration was just as important as flood height or rain intensity when it came to flooding. And when we took it to the engineers who were modeling, they're like, yeah, that's really important for us to know. So we added that data prompt into the investigation. So the more we understand that, the better. In Miami, we obviously have tidal flooding in the mix, and that's similar to what we see in Ocean City, New Jersey. So they wanted to monitor tidal flooding in a very specific way there and rain in a very specific way there. We're going to be working collaboratively with the city on the prompts and the data entry. But if there's other impacts in the community that y'all want to talk about, harmful algae blooms, I heard a lot of things on the WhatsApp channel about, water conditions, after rainstorms, plastics. You teach us how you want to use it and we'll respond. That's how we do it.
I think one other interesting thing that you've done in the past and may continue to do in Miami is create stories that are based on the data and anecdotes that residents are sharing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Julia?
Yeah, so it's hard to take the reporter out of any one of us sometimes, I think. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I left journalism right when I was really doing well, as a journalist. But stories are this construct, right? We think of them as reporters like, okay, I did the story and I walk away, but that's actually not how stories work, right? So we do see trends on the platform, and we have a senior writer, community manager who couldn't join us today, Sam Harrington, who reports directly on what people are posting about on the platform. So even if we don't have a specific, even if we're not partnered for an infrastructure project or with the city of Miami, anyone anywhere in the world, we respond. And we learn new things in that reporting. We also want to make sure that we acknowledge that people have been using the platform and wanting to let us know about things and add value to that conversation. We are partnered with Yale Climate Connections, so they do publish those stories nationwide, and we're open-armed collaborators with local media, we feel like, again, to have the conversation as widely and in different many channels as possible. So we'll be reporting a story on the infrastructure work we did with the city and the engineers here in New Orleans, as that give back to make sure people understand how the data gets used.
Speaking of data use, question from Jeff in the chat. Can everyone see all the data that residents enter? And I'm going to add on to that. Just could you speak briefly to the issue of data privacy, how that's protected? I don't know, Julia or Jared, if one of you wants to take that.
Yeah, so broadly, we take it very seriously. It's something we talk about very regularly. And our community told us early on that they don't want the data shared publicly. So you have access to your own data, but the aggregate is sensitive. We did some early work in Harlem in public housing on urban heat, where people were talking about sneaking air conditioners in that were illegal into their homes to be able to stay cool and survive the summers. But we're so concerned about being outed to the landlords or to NYCHA, to the Public Housing Authority. So with flooding, same difference. We don't want the data to be used or scraped by, and do harm. So everything we do is to make sure that we don't harm real estate values or insurance rates or anything like that when people post about flooding. So what we have is, an aggregate view of the data as it's collected, and then we're working with the city to use the data for infrastructure design. So we don't. You
said it's a census tract, is that right?
To the census tract, yeah, right now. Just on the front end. On the back end, that's a totally different thing. But we decided that seemed like a good enough visualization for people to be able to know, but not know the exact spot or spat home or whatnot.
Okay. One of the things that I think is really cool, and especially in this time when so many kids are at home doing school from home. Oh, sorry, Jeff, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about what the aggregate view is.
It's not going to be live right away, but if you log into the New Orleans investigation, you'll see we're actually just updating the whole mapping product. So when we're going to launch a new code, you're going to see a little spot that says coming back, but I'll try and load it up. Wait, Jared, do we have anything on hand that shows you map? Let's see. I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to try and show you on my phone, but you should just log in and you can see, New Orleans or Ocean City or Boston. If you log in as a resident, if you log in a location from those areas, you will see specific prompts. So when you log in from Miami, you will see a specific prompt to Miami only, and it'll have a map on it. And that map, let's see, I don't think this is going to work. I'm going to try and show you my phone, and it's going to be like, can you see that? No, you can't see that. So try, you zoom in, and it'll, at a point, it'll stop zooming in to the neighborhood level.
I've got a picture I can share.
Okay, great. I know we had one recently, so thank you for finding that.
So I can't share my screen.
Hold on one second. Share screen, advanced sharing. Multiple can share simultaneously. Let's do that. Can you try now?
There we go. Yes. Can you all see that?
There we go.
All right.
Thank you.
So this map view here on the right is what we're looking at.
And as you zoom in, it'll get to that neighborhood / census block level and stop. And that's just on the front end. If that seems too close, we would back up, but I don't know if we would go zoom in more on the public level.
Right.
Cool. Claudia, I wanted to go to you next and just talk a little bit. I was thinking about, in this age of COVID, when a lot of kids are, doing classes from home, or, really the nature of school has really become digital. I think there's a lot of potential here for kind of citizen science and, sort of the junior scientists outside tracking what climate change looks like in the community. And I know that you've done some work trying to get some partnerships launched here with that. Do you want to talk a little bit, Claudia, about the educational aspects, and specifically, I think you have a partnership with Dreaming Green?
That's correct. Yes, thank you for highlighting that, Kate. We're actually very excited to be partnering with Dreaming Green, and we're going to pilot an ISeeChange Schools Challenge for the upcoming academic year, 2020-2021, as an extension sort of bonus activity for, but with plans, with Green Schools Challenge to integrate citizen science components, such as the ones that we've included in the proposal sent to Dreaming Green, so that students are more aware of local issues and what they can do to be part of the solution process. So part of that challenge is to get the kids outdoors. Well, obviously right now with COVID, that's not, it's not something that they can be outdoors too much, but they love being on their phone and they can observe things in their surroundings. Something, maybe the sky is different. I'm noticing more mosquitoes, or like trees are blooming earlier. And so just for them to become more aware of their surroundings while they're on their phones. So, and this is also an educational tool for them, because they could also talk to others in their area, because when everybody, I hope that everybody has already checked out the app and play with the features. When you do that, you have about an 80 miles range from your location. And so it's not my home location, it is of the observation where I'm at. Let's say I live in downtown and I see something happening, or a flood, or an environmental change in Coral Gables. I'm going to, my location will be for that specific location of where my observation is. And so for kids that they're so savvy with technology and their phone, they can just post and talk to others. They can talk to other kids in their schools. We're looking to have different challenges there where it could be more interactive. Teachers can also reply to kids' posts and just share information between themselves. So there's a lot of things that we can do together, and we're still working on what else we could do, but we're very excited for this pilot program with Dreaming Green. They're an excellent organization, and I will be sharing with you guys links to see the open enrollment period that started, and so there's a lot more to come.
And just to follow up on that, I didn't mean to cue the kid while she was talking about this, but he just kind of wandered in as he saw fit. But we actually have worked with local schools, and we thought of that as like separate from our work on infrastructure, until we actually did a report for the engineering firm that we worked with in New Orleans, and saw actually a post from a kid about their experience getting in and out of the bus and how dangerous it felt during a flood event. To do that was included in our report back to the engineers. So it's not, and again, when you think about who are we designing for, right? If we're talking about infrastructure and the life of an infrastructure project being around 50 years, we're designing for the kids just as much as anyone. And we're finding that kind of dialogue with the schools to be really, really fruitful, just in terms of like understanding, who we're building for and how.
Great. So we're almost out of time here. I'm going to give one last question. I'll give the last question to Melissa, and then Claudia, if you want to kind of close, or Julia, if you want to close, I know that there's some information that needs to be shared as far as how do people actually access ISeeChange, how can they get in touch with Claudia as the program manager. But before we get to that, so Melissa, just looking to the future of the city of Miami, where do you think resident engagement, or for what projects do you think resident engagement could be especially valuable going forward? Are there gaps in the data for existing projects that you hope to fill, or just based on the things that are coming down the pipeline, where do you think this could be particularly helpful?
So as I mentioned before, we do have the stormwater master plan that's going to be wrapping up, at the end of this year. And one of the deliverables is getting a capital improvements list of projects that will help alleviate flooding and mitigate flooding. And so I think any input that comes out of the stormwater, or any input on projects that come out of the stormwater master plan, will be very valuable. So that's one. Any of our projects that are pilot projects that are testing innovative or creative ways for using green and natural space would be extremely useful as well. But really, I think any project that goes in the ground is having feedback is useful, because the residents and the community are the ones that live with the projects after they're constructed. And so having that feedback, like I said earlier, is very valuable to us. And really, this is how we build resilience, is by creating climate aware residents at a community level. Because resilience for us is not just about putting projects in the ground, but it's about building community around the things that we're doing, and having a participatory process between all the stakeholders involved.
Great. And I know, just off the top of my head, I think that the Nature Conservancy, right, Rod, has a site that's been selected for a green infrastructure adaptation. Is it at Morningside? Is that the site that was selected? Or maybe more?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Melissa can talk about it. So we've been talking to the city about that project, and we did some analysis there, and we're actually looking at a potential agreement on that. So Melissa, maybe you want to just add some details.
Okay, so Morningside Park, Jose Marti Park as well, right? There's the Van Allen Challenge there.
Jose Marti Park, Brickell Bay Drive will be another one coming down the pipeline that would be good to have some input on as well. And we will, as these projects come out of the pipeline, we'll be, in touch with the community and with regards to what we, which ones we really want the input on, and try to target responses there.
That's awesome.
Great.
I'm a huge fan of some of the TNC green infrastructure workshops that I went to last year. So I'm glad to hear that. And also, just in general, I think one thing I would like everyone to kind of leave with is, as we experiment with solutions, we need to understand how they did as honestly as we can, so that we continue to improve. And it should, and that having community feedback into the design, into that entire process, including what we call monitoring evaluation. After a project is built, did it have the impact that it was designed for? And if not, how do we improve it? So we in New Orleans, and I'm sure many towns have, in the US have been experimenting with, the Dutch living with water experiments. And having just spent 4 months in the Netherlands with Jared, I can tell you that the Netherlands is not Miami. The Netherlands is not New Orleans. They don't have the rain events that we have. They don't have mosquitoes. So as we see these infrastructure projects go in, we need to know, okay, there's no such thing as a one fit solution for any one community. And it's up to us to engage in it productively and collaboratively, and know that we have to just keep learning as we go. And that mindset, I think, kind of sets us up for success going forward. And we're happy to host those conversations.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This has been a really interesting and fun webinar to be part of. Claudia, I think you're going to send out some things via email, right? Do you need people to submit their emails here, or how do you want to wrap things up?
Yes, I think that if everybody has joined this webinar, we have their email contacts. And so I will be following up with our press release that it's already up on our website under our stories. So you can check that out. And I will also be sending you our promo video And so pretty much to synthesize what we talked about today in a minute and a half, to really understand what we're trying to do here. And I hope that I connect with everyone that has joined us here today. And I really look forward to talking to each and every one of you. I'm really happy to see Greg here today. Thank you for joining us. And Rod, I would love to talk to you because I know the great work that the Nature Conservancy is doing here in the city. And I would love to learn more about all the green and blue ways initiatives that you guys are doing.
Great. Well, hope to see everyone on the platform, if not in person.
Totally. Although I will say I'm enjoying the Miami is not Atlantis WhatsApp channel too amongst y'all. So I am listening, and please be in touch with Claudia at ISeeChange.org, Julia at ISeeChange.org, Jared at ISeeChange.org. You can find any one of us, and we're happy to follow it.
Awesome.
Cool cat,
All right.
Lisa. Cool cat. All right. Thanks.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest
Thanks,
of the day.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Melissa.
Bye.